Good evening, everyone. My name is Roland Landers. I'm the CEO of the All India Gaming Federation. And thank you, GAFX 22, for inviting us to be on this panel. I'll be moderating this session today, which will cover the online skill gaming business around the theme of why the importance of a central framework and regulation and how that can really benefit this sunrise industry. I have stalwarts of this industry along with me, who are my friends as well. Uh, Subi Chaturvedi and Divyajyoti Menak and Ankur Devani. I'll give out their designations in a bit. Today we will be discussing this theme that I just mentioned, which is interesting because in the last 4-5 years, we've seen meteoric rise in terms of revenues, and also the entire ecosystem has actually flourished. And happy to say that the AIGF has had a significant role to play in self-regulating the industry and contributing to its growth. Subi Chaturvedi heads public policy at InMobi, and Divyajyoti Menak is the head of policy at Mobile Premier League. Ankur Devani is the CEO at Sachiko Gaming. So I'll just give a little background before we get to the questions to these elite panelists. What we are seeing emanating from the center, at least in the last couple of months, has been very encouraging for the industry, and we are keeping a very exciting view of the same, because we feel that ideally they should come under some central framework, this industry, and only then can we see the real potential that it honestly deserves and can contribute to the nation building. Starting with the Honorable Prime Minister, who in several interviews mentioned that India can be gaming can take India to the world stage actually, and India can be a great contributor. He also spoke about indigenous gaming and the potential it holds. Thereafter, we've seen that the Honorable Minister of State from the METI also speak on the floor of the House very positively about online skill gaming companies being intermediaries, and that is really encouraging. So collectively, I think, and also the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned about the setting up of this AVGC task force, and we know that gaming is an integral part of that AVGC thought process. So with that background, let me just start with maybe I can ask each of the panelists to give certain opening remarks around these developments that have happened in the recent past, and then I can get into specific questions. So we'll start with Subi. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Roland. As you said, it's great to be amongst friends who are also kindred spirits and fellow travelers. And thank you, Roland, once again for bringing us all together on this platform of GAF. I'm really happy and delighted that I'm joined with DJ as well as Ankur. There are several aspects to gaming, and before we get into regulation, it's very important that we understand the opportunity at hand. So we're roughly about 400 million gamers in India, and various industry reports, without naming anyone in particular, have poised this number to grow and multiply leaps and bounds. Why is this so critical? We're looking at upwards of 700 million gamers, out of which 70% of them have indicated that they'd like to play professionally. This is also the world where first-time users of the internet come online, they access the internet, and they take the Honorable Prime Minister's vision further of Jan Dhan, mobile and Aadhaar, unlocking the true potential of India's $5 trillion digital economy dream. And that is why this industry deserves the love, care, and attention that we keep clamoring for. I'm here to make a case and not ask for the Santa wish list, which is only rightful that justice be done. And the indications that you mentioned, the steps that the government government is now taking are very, very welcome in this direction. So I first want to start by congratulating both the governments at the center as well as the state for looking at this industry in such positive light. The constitution of the AVGC is but the first step in the many to come. We hear that the committee constituents have been announced. We heard that there is a 90-day plan, but what the industry is really looking forward to is wider representation from across different formats. And here is what is at stake. We're looking at upwards of 2 lakh new jobs being created in the next 2 years if our policy asks are met. We're looking at least 43% of all these gamers being women. So this is the industry that does not divide, that does not exclude. It is very, very inclusive. We're also looking at an industry where under your championship and under the oversight and mentorship of the Skill Games Council, which is part of the All India Gaming Federation, that has representation from the former Chief Justices, also the chairman of the Bombay Stock Exchange, mental health experts, great educationists, as well as fantastic academicians who've been father figures and they've been writing policies as well as vocationalizing education in India. These are the people under which a very responsible, ethical, transparent industry flourishes, which has 5 different kinds of gaming. So what is at stake is online skill-based games of mental aptitude, games which challenge you, casual games, social games, games that help you build mental faculties. And remember this, we're in a post-COVID scenario, which means that there are over 160 million children who are still out of school globally, and many of the worst sufferers have been young girls. So what is it that we're looking to do together when this industry comes together is to unlock this $5 trillion digital opportunity. And therefore, what is it that we ask for? And these are just my initial comments, and happy to hear more from my learned colleagues on the panel.
Yeah.
We ask for an open system where there is constant engagement with the industry. We ask for regulation that looks at balancing consumer interests, citizen interests, as well as orderly growth of the industry, that allows for inputs before taking decisions, and that looks at evidence and research-based policy making, not policy making that may be based on popular perception or a few disjointed pieces that somebody would have expressed by way of opinion, but not backed by fact, evidence, or science. And therefore, any framework that looks at creating a light touch governance mechanism so that this industry can flourish, that allows you to engage with our elected representatives who also represent the same industry, which is very respectable and which is unlocking immense potential and putting India on the global map, that is discovering lost and forgotten games of India, and that is taking the soft power of India global. And in a world which is fraught with trauma, which is fraught with a lot of, let's say, inward looking citizens who are fearful of what the future holds tomorrow. That's the spirit of creativity and joy. And also what is at stake are, as we speak today, another industry forum is holding 1,000 unicorns and startups being unlocked. And remember, this is what is at stake. So a central framework that looks at light touch governance and that looks at balancing regulatory obligations with allowing the industry to flourish, proliferate is what is really our ask. And that is what is the center of the debate or discussion or dialogue that this forum has allowed us to create. I'll stop here for now, Roland.
Thank you, Subhi, for the initial comments, and happy to note that you covered the important ones. If I can come to you, Divyajyoti, and get the opening comments from your side as well. And then to Ankur thereafter, and then I would, ask some of all of you all specific questions.
Sure.
Divyajyoti, if I may request.
Sure. Thanks, Roland, and thanks, Subhi. I think completely agree with the comments that you have made, and a big fan of the work, the proactive work that the other panelists here, Ankur, Subhi, some others who are not here have done. Thanks to the AIGF as well, which has been proactively championing the industry for many years. In fact, more years than at least MPL's business has been around. So yeah, I mean, great work, and absolute pleasure to be working with you, with all of you. I think I think a lot of the work is bearing fruit now. I think so. We spoke about the government national AVGC policy. I think what was also important is this is the first time that we saw a government department. This was in the recent parliament sessions where for the very first time the government came out in response to a question. The media came out and said we recognize the distinction between games of skill and chance. Now that acknowledgement has never come from the government. The government has always refused to acknowledge that, and indeed, some of the governments have passed laws saying that the distinction is nebulous and does not really exist. So from there to the central government saying it on the floor of parliament is actually a huge achievement, I would say, and it's a long way that the government has come. I think that gives us a lot of confidence on the outlook for the industry. I think the other place where we have seen recognition of the softer aspects of the industry, so not just about whether it's different from skill and chance, but also in terms of its impact on the society, right? I think the ASCII coming up with a more, I would say, rational disclaimer than before, where it has finally accepted that they're not games are not universally addictive, that not all games can, as we were saying, be looked at from the same lens. It totally depends upon what the games are, what the skills they're testing are, what the skills they're building in people, and what are the kind of competitions that exist for that game, right? So I think that recognition from the ASCII is also important. I think that will go a long way in sorting out the overall perception of the industry, because it was a little unfair when the industry was forced to call itself addictive. And I've said this many times before, like, with esports being a medal event, with gaming being a career, really, like, if when Virat Kohli plays 12 hours of cricket, nobody calls him an addict. So I don't understand why that breaks when it's an online game and not an offline game. So I think good recognition. I think courts have done their part. I think the government's beginning to do their part, and I think industry continues to do its part. And outlooks favorable after a long time.
Thank you, Divyajyoti. Absolutely. We've not felt, a better sentiment than we are now in the last 6 months at least. Thank you for that. And Ankur, if I may come to you now and request you to give your opening comments.
Sure. No, thank you for having us, Roland. It's a pleasure, and it always has been working with everybody from the AIGF and in general with industry colleagues, right, who are all looking to work together and help us progress. So I'll take a more simplistic view of things. I mean, my colleagues are very learned in their own space, and they have a far better outlook, I would say, towards policy and regulation. But I can tell you that at least from my experience working on some of the global markets, how they review and how they look at regulation and what the core objective is. So at least stepping back a bit, right? And if you just think about gaming as a whole, we've all been playing games ever since we were kids. At no point has it ever been told that you can't do this, you can't do that. And anything obviously within moderation is fine. So I think when it comes to digital games, it's pretty much the same, right? You've just now stepped from that physical world into now a digital world. And within that, the opportunities are immense. And let's just not only look at gaming, right? There's OTT, there's trading, there's blockchain, there's so much that's happening in general. So we can't look at one thing in silo and say that this is one industry deserves a certain kind of attention only and everything else is fine. So in general, we're becoming way more dynamic as people, as an economy, and globally we're becoming sort of more and more closer, right? With all of that happening, you cannot take a view on one small space and call it something. So I think you have to become a little more open towards things. And with that, I would say that I think the government, for the first time, at least as we're saying it now, has taken a very sort of positive step. We've been having dialogue now for years, and I think it's always been one of those things where either body never has had complete clarity, either at a state level or even if it's MeitY, nobody's ever had complete clarity. So the fact that we now have support from the central government and the Prime Minister obviously endorsing gaming and putting the AVGC, I think was the first step towards that, is a very welcome step, something that we've been waiting for a long time. And like Subi and DJ said, right, we are hoping to work together with these guys and try and come to at least a first step that is a win-win for everybody, right? The players, the operators, and the government. So yeah, looking forward to all of these developments.
Thank you, Ankur. DJ, Divyajyoti, if I may come to you, we've been discussing this individually and as a group within the AIGF also. This AVGC task force that has been set up, obviously is focused on the, we know, on the services side and the talent part, right? But one needs to look at the expansion of this as modern regulatory reforms unfold. How do you see, what is your view on, this expansion, and realistically what the ABGC task force can do for our industry?
Thanks. Well, so look, the purpose of any policy, right, and especially an ABGC policy, is to create conditions that allows a nascent, a sunrise sector to thrive. And in that sense, and I think from a government perspective, as well as from a perspective of us as operators, right? Like for us, our central stakeholder is the customer, and it's the same stakeholder for the government as well, right? Because the customer is the citizen. So I think the ABGC policy needs to include things that refer to the customer, that refer to the player in this case, right? So any ABGC policy that includes within its fold player protection, player promotion of new careers in gaming, and so on and so forth, by default is a good policy and is speaking to the people it's trying to impact, right? Only when, I keep saying this, right, like only when you have players who are promoted, players who are recognized, players who are given their due for being online gamers, will you see the ecosystem around it spring up. That's when game developers will have incentives to make better games. That's when operators will have incentive to provide better contests. That's where people will have better incentive to make, even like, people who make OEMs basically will have incentive to make better devices, and so on and so forth. So I think it's very important to have a player-centric ABGC policy that asks the question of where are the gamers of India coming from? What are the games that they're playing? What are the careers, and what are the careers that they're choosing, and so on and so forth. There is no point of coming up with a policy that targets only a very minority sector of section of players or a minority section of users. You need to, I mean, and that's where I'm coming from, because we have an industry here which between itself commands about 150 million or maybe more users, right? So you can't have an ABGC policy that ignores this 150 million. Now you may not like, or you may like some of the things that they do, some of the things that they don't, but you cannot, whatever your stance on it is, you cannot ignore 150 people. That is your gamer crowd. So it's all great to make a policy for 50,000 odd people, or 5 esports players who are playing at the Asian Games. But if you're not going to include the mass gamer, the common man or the common woman gamer, it's not much of a policy as well. So that's where I am coming from.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, DJ. Because we also at the AGF focus on the entire ecosystem, because as the entire value chain grows, that's when we'll have holistic growth. So whether it is the product innovations that are happening, game development is happening, investors backing startups who are coming up in this space, running businesses, and then the gamer, who's a very important cog. And so we mentioned, it's and our own numbers that we've given to EY as they compile these reports forecasting. By 2025, that number is going to go to 500 million. And of course, the revenues is scheduled to double to more than 3 billion. So great numbers. So the demand side, when this ABGC looks at in a very broad manner, as DJ mentioned, we really expect that to happen. This expansion of the gaming part to include the businesses, the gaming business side of things as well, and definitely, as Dibyanoti mentioned, the player being at the center of it. Would you like to comment on that, Subi?
Thank you, Roland. I think there are multiple dimensions to the problem that you just formulated. It's very, very important that we recognize and celebrate what the government is doing. And I think it's remarkable that you have a budget announcement where there is conversation on at least breaking down and addressing animation, video games, and content layer by layer. And that's why when we start out, because we are very close to our businesses, we know the exact scope and scale of the potential that we're about to unlock. And therefore, the attempt is to make sure that we keep content conversation open to look at all possible stakeholders. And that's the role that one aspect of what AIGF has successfully done is to bring together all possible formats of gaming. I don't think there are very many associations that can lay claim to that. And that is why when we talk about self-regulation, that's when we talk about community participation, it carries heft and it carries weight, because there are various formats, including the elusive educative skill games, which I tend to represent at the IGF forum. It's very, very important that we understand that you're not dealing with a blanket homogenized set of players that only do certain formats. And even there are co-shared formats. And that's why my hero as a child, when I was writing an essay, was and has always remained the Constitution of India. And our fathers who founded this amazing nation spent a lot of time discussing that, where today in the 75th year of India's independence, we're celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And one of the pillars is the scientific development and inculcation of scientific temper that we're looking at. So what has worked for us is the ability of the industry to come together and tell each other off if we're making a mistake, saying, hey, don't run that ad or don't do this. And that's how representation of the right set of industries, the right set of bodies counts. Then we look at player protection, then we look at consumer interest, and we must understand as an industry too, what is it that the government is trying to get at. So here is a set of inputs that's given to policymakers, and then comes another set of inputs. How do we make meaning of it? How do we make sense of it? How do we strike the right balance? That's where people like you, Roland, that's where people like us, all of us who are in the room today matter, so that we make sense of what's really at stake and how do we get this right. States have a role to play, and so does a central framework. And this is where cooperative federalism truly comes in. This is where parsing online skill-based games versus gambling versus betting versus, let's say, match fixing, all of these things need to be looked at independently. The courts have shown enough jurisprudence, and we need to understand that there are several bright line tests that exist today. In a game of skill, over time, is it possible to lose? Is it ensuring that over time your player is enhancing their skill and therefore improving winnability? There are several such tests that will tell you, and there are several such responsible players that are happy to showcase to the government and the powers that be that this is how legally vetted games, where there is a lot of work that goes on before any game gets published or goes on air, happens. And that's the input that we need to take when we look at policy. Policies are never for companies. Policies are for industries. Policies are for countries. And let us not forget, we are not competing with companies anymore. We're competing with countries. So if you leave a very large section of either developers, young enthusiasts, engineers, what does India have? It has culture, it has content, it has creativity, it has immense amount of engineering talent. And just as in agriculture, we will never do well unless we're looking at not just the farmer to removing the middlemen and straight to the market, unless we're looking at value addition in our goods. And that's what engineering meets creativity, meets storytelling, meets animation, meets visually rich games, which go back to our very, very rich cultural past. So there's a game in Japan called Asura that looks at tales from the Ramayana, Buddhist spiritual text, and sci-fi. And it has done tremendously well. Those are the kind of impact that we're looking at at creating. And that can't happen unless there's constant dialogue and willingness to listen. So I see the AVGC committee constitution as a milestone. But what I also see is the immense amount of work that is ahead of us. So how do we create a process which is always listening, which takes a lot of inputs, and make sure that repeatedly it engages? So a model like TRAI exists before us, which would put out a draft consultation paper, then take inputs, then hold a public house, then make sure it goes back to that input and then tweaks the draft paper, then seeks inputs again. So that's how this is successful, because India is an argumentative democracy and all Indians have fair amount of opinion, research, engagement, and there is immense willingness on the part of business to engage. And what is great is the government is listening. There is a platform that we can now engage. So therefore, representation of not just women gamers, players, policymakers, business, industry, as well as investors. What are investors looking for? And Ankur alluded to that. So what is at stake is stable, predictable policy that allows for investments and that allows for disruption to take place. And that's the kind of framework that we're looking at, which can't happen unless this comes down from the center and then the states work together to make sure that this is a thriving business prospect.
Thank you, Subhi. In fact, just prior to this session, I had a call with one of the ministries centrally, and because their focus, is on the investment side, it was a very interesting discussion. And over the last month and a half, we've reached out to the most important, ministries, including the PMO, and the response has been extremely, extremely positive, and the willingness to, to listen to the pain point areas and help us as an industry to, to circumvent those, mitigate those. So we are in an extremely good place. Ankur, if I may, dwell on that subject of investment, and, one of the questions that I need to now give data points to before the AVGC first meeting happens on the 4th, to this ministry at least, is, the investments, which countries are they come from, and within our online skill gaming industry, and the importance of this our sector attracting investments, and if you can really comment on that.
Sure. So at a broad level, look, there's going to be interest from players, operators, investors, entrepreneurs from across the world, right? Anyone that has ever either been a part of an investment in gaming, operates a current business in gaming, could it be game of chance, game of skill, whatever it is. But all of these people are a group that would be immediately interested in India, right? Just because of look at the foundational opportunity that people are looking at. 1.3 billion people. Of that, that a huge portion falls under that 18 to 35 age group. So there is a lot of growth. There's a lot of forward potential. There are people that are very Western looking in their I guess opportunity and growth right now. So there's a lot of that happening, and they want to capitalize on that, right? Who wouldn't, right? So from that perspective, what's required is for us to be able to actually give them the backdrop against which all of this becomes possible. Like Subhi and DJ have been saying, right? We need to create an environment where all of this can thrive. There is dialogue, there is openness, there's ability to innovate. We cannot clamp down saying that you can do it, but only if you do X, Y, and Z. And there is a lot still to uncover even for us, right? I think gaming at a global level is going through changes with the inclusion of blockchain, with various formats coming in. So I don't think there is a set format saying that this is what you should be doing. I think there is a set format for this is what you should be considering, which is that these are all the people and the stakeholders you need to take care of, right? Everything from your player to begin with, all the way to the government and everybody in between. So if that's something that we can keep in mind, like I think, yeah, the world is ready to invest in India in pretty much everything, and gaming is no different. If anything, I think from a global lens, if you look at some of the countries in which some of these operators are, primarily UK or the US or some of the other countries where there are, I'd say, regulation is a lot more friendlier, you'll notice that gaming tends to become one of the top 10 industries pretty much everywhere in a steady state, in a mature market where there is potential to grow. and where there is openness for the government to actually allow all of this to happen, it becomes a top 10 industry. So from that perspective, India should be no different. I think even Sambani has made a comment on how large it could be. And if we talk about things like entertainment and television and music, and if gaming could outdo all of that, right? Obviously, just think about the amount of funds that are going to be required to even get there. So if you think that the output potential is, let's say, 1 trillion, 2 trillion over a period of a couple of years for digital in general, of which gaming takes a certain pie, you can't get there with just the current investments, right? We'll have to invest a lot more, and to do that, you'll have participants from around the world.
Roland,
thanks.
I just want to add here, because you made a specific points on investment. It's very, very important that we decode this and dwell on this just a little more. I'll give you our example. InMobi was India's first unicorn, the first company in which SoftBank decided to invest money in. We've just acquired a gaming company called Nostragamus or Gambit. And we're looking at now with our combined strength, volume, one of the leading players in the country. Let's look at the investment buckets. So Google is our investor. Ankur, you just talked about Mr. Ambani. Jio's made a strategic investment of over $200 million US. And Mithril Capital or Peter Thiel led one of the most innovative set of companies. They've been our investor. What's happening as we speak is the Pragati OS being developed, which is going to bring in a new set of 100 million handsets, which are affordable, which are easy to operate, and that are onboarding people who've been using feature phones for now. And one of the most important triggers, which used to be entertainment and Bollywood music, today is gaming. So some of your first experiences, if you're a first-time internet user, are going to happen on platforms like ours, people who are present in the room today. And that means the world. You're opening up an entire ecosystem to people who've just experienced certain features of the internet so far, or who've experienced the internet secondhand. So live experiences through gaming, through streaming, through subscription models, through advertisement. We're talking about not just job creation, we're talking about investments, we're talking about new revenue models, we're talking about recharging an economy globally. And therefore, the interest, not just from Japan, South Korea, Middle East, Germany, Berlin has become this unusual center for investments in gaming. South Korea has always had that lead, but for video games. Ecosystems are being created in various countries so that gaming, game developers, businesses, and startups can work with each other and create this magic to unlock immense amount of potential for digital economy. So that's the size and scale of opportunity that we're talking about. So just as India's gung-ho on micro transactions, and we've done our best through UPI to encourage payments and onboarding, we're talking about behavior change communication. We're talking about unlocking the live experience of internet, where people consume news, people consume content, but some of their first experiences of the internet are now going to happen through games. That's the reason why they're coming online. That's what is at stake today.
Thank you, Subhi. Absolutely right. And, because of this vantage position that I sit at, there's so many inquiries and calls I get practically on a daily basis from international companies who are looking at India, either to set up shop in the skill gaming side or look at investments coming in. And as you rightly said, this innovation is happening at a frantic pace. Content with gaming and gaming sitting on top of so many things that make up the media entertainment landscape. Ankur, we are fourth now in the stack up within the M&E space, but definitely this is going to after television, print, and digital. But the potential is immense. And DJ, if I may ask you, over the last 5 years, I think 2.5 billion worth of investments have come into this sector, but significantly in the last 12 to 15 months, that number is almost 80% of that number has come in in the recent past. So if I may have your views, and then move on to the overarching guidelines part. Yeah, DJ.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before as well. Clarity in regulation will bring in more investments. At the end of the day, investors like certainty. They like stability and atmosphere where their money can grow and thrive, right? And the products that investment is going into can also thrive. So I think clarity in regulation will necessarily bring in more investment. That's something we are very, very clear on. And I think that the reason why you've had a lot of investment come in recently is also down to that, exactly that clarity, right? So it's over the
Yeah.
same period of the last 1 year or 2 years that you've had multiple high courts now come out and give you that kind of regulatory clarity. I mean, where the government, the central government hasn't been able to give that clarity yet. The state governments have obfuscated it, and the thankfully the high courts have come and kind of unwound that obfuscation and given us a lot of clarity. And I think, and you see the results and the way investments respond as a result of that, right? So I think it's important for us to keep doing that. Now I understand this is a dynamic sector. I understand this is a sunrise sector. So obviously, light touch self-regulation is the way to go. But that doesn't mean that that is not to be confused with unclear regulation, right? So, and therefore, you can have very clear self-regulation. You can have dynamic self-regulation. It's just for the government to come in and probably give their blessings to one of the self-regulatory organizations, and or even multiple ones for that matter, and ensure that everybody is following some or the other charter.
Yeah. Thanks, DJ. Obviously, because at the AIGF we follow this principle that the commonality has to be the gains of skill, and and that is why we cover the entire breadth of this exciting industry. And happy to mention that we are close to now 75 plus members and reaching that target of 100 members very soon. One of the stakeholders that we've not focused too much on, and maybe GAFX is the right platform, is the game development side. So we look at the gamers very minutely, the gaming businesses that you all run, and maybe we could look at that segment also now, and be inclusive as we mentioned. And the other one, of course, as technology unfolds, also look at what Web 3.0 is enabling right now, and look at the from the pay to play to even beyond pay to earn side of gaming. So yeah, those are some of the things that we are working upon. But happy to work with a set of people like yourselves who have contributed to the to the growth of the industry and the industry body AIGF. And lastly, if I may speak about these, people talk about central regulation, but what discussions we've been having at the AIGF with the various stakeholders is obviously some guidelines that can come, because we also have to keep in mind timelines, time frames, because you cannot expect things to happen overnight, to look at a change of act, etc. But if there are some central guidelines and there are precedents in other industries, that could kind of bind this all together and probably build on the skill gains charter that AIGF any case has, but being a little more expansive, if I may say that, to include certain things that make up the construct of the new IT Act, etc. So if I may have the comments of all of you all on that, and then we can get into the closing remarks and conclude. So if I can start with you.
Thank you, Roland, for putting me on this spot. I'm very happy that the IT Act is looking at a revision. A lot has happened since the last time it was amended. And when we've been in discussions with the ministry for a very, very long time, I might add that it has some of the finest bureaucrats, as well as, the entire team that supports, especially the cyber law and media cell that looks at legislation. They've been one of the most receptive, one of the most those forthcoming people. Whenever there's confusion, we are heard. Whenever clarification is needed, it is sought. And this is the kind of healthy dialogue that we're talking about. So we're very happy when we see the Honorable Minister make comments that we're now looking at a draft revision. A lot has happened since the entire world has recognized that privacy is a fundamental right. We're looking at large data fiduciaries. We're also looking at several laws that are intersecting. So where does gaming really sit, and what is it that we can look at by way of positive policy making, or let's say guidelines that help us foster and thrive? So there are do's and don'ts, and like DJ alluded to, Ankur alluded to, what we're saying is, can we look at a one-arm remove self-regulatory framework which can sit with the Skill Games Council with adequate representation from the government? The industries which run in parallel where this has worked really well is the media, where there's been a press council, there's been an editors, broadcasters guild, there's a news broadcasters association, and they've done their job tremendously well, which is why when we look at media in India, you have over 467 daily news channels, you have journalists speaking truth to power, and they do their job reasonably well. When we look at game development, nobody can profess to know our business better than ourselves. So therefore, an industry body and a platform that has adequate representation, but that is where the buck really stops. What is it that is a game of skill versus what is the game of chance? And I completely respect the fact that the government does not want to be in a position to have to decide that. It's not their mandate. So this is where the AIGF process, and you mentioned the charter, might I add, it's one of the most rigorous, well-drawn, well-researched charters that we've looked at, from player protection to how we keep our monies, how the utilization happens, to how a game is certified, who can be a member, what is a game of skill, and where is it that preponderance of skill really sits. So when we went through the process in one of our former avatars, from submitting research data to submitting simulations to submitting the rules of the game to what is the innovation that has happened in your game to make it a game of skill is also tabled. So guidelines that exist where we are able to demarcate very clearly what is a game of skill, how will you determine, what is the process that you have followed, how much of it is evidence based and how much of it is backed by research, is one of the things we're looking at. So one is to make sure that you're keeping the bad actors out. You're also creating an ecosystem which recognizes and celebrates the good actors. Second is, what does a policy really do? A policy is not law. A policy is put out to encourage a sector and an industry to grow. So how is it that this policy can create an enabling ecosystem? Let's look at that, and then look at the guidelines, which would be broad, 40,000 feet view above the ground. Hey, some do's and some don'ts, right? So who do you bring on board? How do you seek opinions? How do you legitimize? And then how do you create an ecosystem where four actors, which is what the internet is made of: industry, academia, media, civil society, private sector, industry, government, will work together to produce research that helps and academically interprets the industry, and second, builds in the amount of research and rigor that this industry needs to get academic recognition. I've been a teacher, Roland, so parents still decide what careers children pursue in 10 plus 12, what subjects they're going to take. And this is where the kind of courses, and we have over 25 institutes just in Delhi and NCR teaching these programs. It's only with the integration with the new education policy that the government came out with. So look what's happening around us. MHRD, which used to be a separate ministry, skills used to be a separate ministry, is one ministry. We have given us all the right directions, right? So that's how we're putting the spotlight, saying entrepreneurship, skills, and education has to go hand in hand. So that's the kind of guideline we're looking at, that you create these norms, which are broad, high-level principles of, hey, this is what can happen. The house will not play, or you will not introduce bots. The rigor that AIGF skill charter really has. So and that's very, very exhaustive. For a government document, we make it simple. We keep the text shorter. And this is something that we can all agree with. And from there comes the policy. How do we encourage investors? How do we protect investments? How do we make sure that local engineers, institutions of eminence and excellence like IIT Kanpur are working with Center for Culture and Creative Industries and say, I'm Ahmedabad. That's then translating it into a DPS or a Kendriya Vidyalaya, and there's an ecosystem that grows. So the same kind of celebration that animation saw in the 90s, and therefore you have an Avatar and you have Indian engineers contributing on Hollywood movies, and we are so proud of it. Those are the same set of stories that with esports, with games, with storyboard formats, with casual games, with hyper casual games, we have not only onboarded an entire generation. So I heard recently, I was in a flight and I heard that somebody's 80-year-old grandma checks in every single morning to pay Candy Crush with her. And that's the kind of bridging that we're doing to not leave an entire generation of either senior citizens or younger people, or the connection of building and taking India and Bharat along together. So that's what I believe a guideline and a policy framework can do for us.
Thank you, Subhi. Yeah, and also, recently we had done our AIGF knowledge series, and some of y'all were part of it, Divyajyoti and Subhi. I'm very happy to mention that one of the representatives did mention about the role of the SRO, and it's exactly what we are doing. And also, interestingly, the Skill Games Council, the neutral body that can qualify these games of skill, because we are seeing tremendous innovation happening. And who knows, today, as you mentioned, we have 5 formats that qualify as games of skill, including this entire large piece of casual gaming. But who knows, tomorrow there could be so many other innovative formats coming. But the commonality of all of it, the foundation being, games of skill. And this Skill Games Council and the role that they are playing is going to be, and that's why that was, instituted to be this. And I did mention that, we'll be happy that, if the Skill Games Council stakeholders can contribute and, and be a part of this overarching guidelines. So Ankur, if I can have your closing remarks and then final word to DJ before we close out.
Sure, I think I completely concur with what Subhi said. And in general, look, if you even go back to your point about investments and just growth in general, right? All of that will come from, like we've been saying, predictability and ensuring the sort of development of this industry in a slightly more open and sort of, I'd say, inclusive manner, right? And if you look at how all of the other countries have done it, they've all followed a very standard path, which is you talk to operators, understand how things are going, talk to players, understand the pain points, and then just set some guidelines that are a starting point. But they're never the end point. So I think what we're looking for is a starting point that hopefully all of us can evolve with. Not necessarily a gaming authority issuing licenses and things like that. Luckily, the government has recognized games of skill outside of the Public Gaming Act a long time ago. So that's already something that I think we've progressed on a long time back. But in general, I think just this one starting point is very critical. And that coming from the central government gives a lot more confidence and clarity to everybody, right? From operators to the courts down under. And that's what's been needing, I think, probably for the last 5 years. Obviously, the last 2 years is where we've seen this rapid growth, thanks to even sort of, in part COVID, unfortunately. But just given where we are at today, I think it's very critical that we all start talking, communicating, figuring out objectives that each of us think are critical, and talking to all of these stakeholders across the board, and just formatting some sort of an initial guideline that becomes pretty much the foundation for us to kind of take this into, whatever maybe the next sort of 3 years of evolution from here on.
Yeah, thank you, Ankur. And yeah, one of the themes that we also touched upon in the AIGF knowledge series was how the positive judicial judgments have brought business certainty, as Divyajyoti also mentioned. So very interesting. But also, since you just mentioned it, I think on our panel it was also highlighted that licensing is not something that even they prefer. So it's good for all of us. And let's see how it unfolds. I'm sure that this the comments mentioned in this panel will also be taken into account. So Divyajyoti, if I can come to you for the final word and closing remarks, and then we'll close out. Thank you.
Solid. I think first and foremost, thank you so much to everyone for being on the panel. It's been an absolute pleasure, as usual, interacting with you guys and speaking about issues of common interest. I think a lot of work has gone into ensuring a safe and good, healthy atmosphere ecosystem for the growth of gaming in India. And I think the people on this call have been instrumental in doing that. So I hope this continues. I hope that we are able to push through unified views, and even if we aren't able to get to an absolute consensus, we can build a near consensus. I think that works as well. And I'm hoping that we can continue to do that going forward.
Yeah, thank you, DJ. I would like to end by saying that, within this, in the last 12 years, and under the edges of the self-regulatory framework, if the industry has, in the last 7 years, if the industry has grown so rapidly and, so significantly, we can only expect to contribute in an extremely large way to the nation building, whether it is job creations or bringing out innovation itself in the ecosystem, and finally the economic benefits that could accrue in a more I think multifold manner if we have those overarching central guidelines. Thank you so much for contributing, Dr. Suvi, Dibbit Jyoti and Ankur, and I look forward to interacting with you all individually and collectively. Thanks
Thank
again.
you,
And
Roland,
thank
for
you,
Likewise.
GAFX 22 once again, Biren and the team for facilitating this. Thanks again.
I was saying thank you,
Thank you
Roland,
all.
for being a fantastic moderator, and as always, great sharing the panel with both of you, DJ and Ankur.
Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having us, Roland. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.